In the wake of the Garissa University College attack, Leader of Majority in the National Assembly and Garissa Member of Parliament Aden Duale stood before a grieving nation and made an unforgettable promise.
We will, with immediate effect, commence to identify them, to document them, and to expose all the members, the financiers, and sympathizers of Al-Shabaab within the next 1 month.
This decision to present the list was supported by over 20 leaders who stood steady behind him. Leaders who included the Garissa Governor Nadhif Jama, Marsabit Governor Ukur Yatani, Wajir Governor Ahmed Abdullahi, and Mandera Governor Ali Robber. Now, this was not a team to be discounted, and their sensitive pledge was certainly not one to be ignored. But as you may already know by now, that 30-day timeline that the leaders themselves created lapsed, and silence ensued. In that silence, questions sprang, and Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Ngaiseri wanted an answer.
The leaders of Northeastern, you should be ready. Maybe after this governors' meeting. I'm also actually curious to get that list.
The days following that statement were filled with political posturing, with a section of leaders demanding that Duale, as a spokesperson of the Northeastern leaders, step aside for failing to deliver his promise. The demand to resign may have been unrealistic, but the majority leader, never one to walk away from a good fight, packed his punch and delivered this blow in Garissa.
We are not answerable to anybody. We owe nobody any form of a list. As the leadership, we will work with the president and we will work with the security agents to make sure Kenya is safe, Northeastern is safe from Al-Shabaab.
Well, there are a few problems with that statement. So let's begin with the "we're not answerable to anyone" part. As elected representatives of the people, Duale and indeed all the leaders who stood behind him are answerable to their electorate, and their bosses extend beyond their counties and constituencies. Where the power lies in this country is such an important issue that it is the very first thing addressed in the Constitution. All sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. That is part of Chapter 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution. So if we're to go by that, then Duale and indeed all public office holders in Kenya are answerable to you, the people. Then there's this.
We owe nobody any form of a list.
Well, technically, that's not entirely true. So we go back to the Constitution, which in Chapter 6 describes the authority assigned to a state officer as a public trust. It goes on to state that a public officer will demonstrate respect for the people, and in the same article says that public officers will provide selfless service demonstrated by, among other things, accountability to the public for decisions and actions. So let me repeat that for the avoidance of doubt. Accountability to the public for decisions and actions. Now, no one asked those leaders to make their announcement, least of all publicly. But in doing so, they made a promise which the Constitution says they must now be accountable for. The promise was the decision. Their announcement was an action. But if the responsibility ought to be shared collectively, why then is Aden Duale the walking bull's eye? The answer is simple: his position. See, Duale, as the leader of majority in parliament, executes duties previously performed by the leader of government business, who was the vice president. He's the link between the executive and parliament. He signs all government bills and coordinates government ministries and parliamentary committees, as well as the judiciary. And because he's from the party in power, he's also the legitimate spokesperson of government and the executive in parliament. To say that Duale is powerful is to put it mildly. In fact, in 2010, before Duale was named majority leader, Ababu Nomwamba said in an interview with The Standard that second to the presidency, the majority leader will be the most powerful person in the country. Whoever occupies it can make or break the presidency. Lawyer Paul Mwite in the same interview said it will be a very powerful post, even greater than the vice presidency in terms of real power. For Duale, it is simply an issue of great power which comes with great responsibility. A responsibility that Duale seems to have abandoned on several occasions. Now allow me to explain. In June of 2014, in the wake of the Mpeketoni killings in Lamu, Duale, with all his power and responsibility, stood on the floor of the House and said this.
It is not a must that you must lead. You must lead. Mr. Speaker, you must wait for 2017. You can't massacre our people. You cannot massacre our people. You want to ascend to leadership through the blood of our people.
Now, that's not a light claim, especially given that it came even before the bereaved families of the over 60 people killed buried their kin. Duale never substantiated his claims. He never provided evidence of the same, and 2 months later, Asman Kamama, who chairs the National Assembly Committee on Administration and National Security, told Parliament that the Al-Shabaab was behind the killings. In July of that same year, the majority leader was again under the microscope. Following continued attacks in the county, David Kimayo, then Inspector General of Police, issued a curfew that required all Lamu residents to remain indoors during the period the curfew was in force, except under and in accordance with terms and conditions of a written permit granted by the county commander. Please, let's not forget that the curfew was ordered to enable police effectively pursue armed militants who had staged a series of attacks in the restive county. Yet on his Twitter handle, Duale tweeted, "Muslims in Lamu County must go to the mosques for the last 10 days of Ramadan prayers despite the curfew." His rationale for asking Kenyans to defy a security order was later explained in a second tweet. Maintaining security in Lamu County is paramount, but denying Muslim faithful their religious obligation on this holy month is unacceptable. Now let's be clear here. We know that the curfew was and still is a contentious method of security implementation, and arguments have been made against the imposition of curfews on many accounts. But the police had said that the curfew could be excused under and in accordance with terms and conditions of a written permit granted by the county commander. There was already a provision within the curfew that would allow people attend prayers while the curfew was still in place. Then there was this spectacle that ensued at a political rally.
Unasema pesa mashinani. Kono ngine hutaki tukuulize maswali. Hii pesa si ya mama yako bwana.
That statement, which was directed at Bomet governor and at the time the chairperson of the Governor's Council, was seen as a mockery to the electorate. Duale's critics argued that abusing leaders in public went against the spirit of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which cautions state officers against demeaning their office. Demands were made that Duale be held accountable for his words and make an apology. The majority leader rubbished the calls, insisting that he had the right to challenge the governor. By the way, these utterances were made in the same country where Nandi Hills MP Alfred Keter, nominated MP Sonia Birdi, faced charges for violating the same Chapter 6 of the Integrity Act. But Duale's actions were ignored as him being a political challenger. Well, what about these words that were captured by the BBC Somali service? Duale came under sharp attack after that audio recording went public, with many interpreting his words as a suggestion of negotiations with terrorists. The majority leader would later move to clarify his intent, and this is what he told KTN's Rita Tinina.
My position is this, that the communities on the Kenyan side should send their political leaders, their religious leaders, their elders to their counterparts across. And our brothers and sisters across the communities who live there must be held responsible for allowing people to pass through them to attack Kenyan citizens.
The problem with words is that once they escape the safety of lips, they cannot be taken back. And when powerful public figures make questionable remarks, the repercussions are grand. Duale himself knows this. In fact, just today, in an interview with the Standard newspaper, he says of himself, "I am aware that I sometimes come out very strongly, but this is because I have to defend the Constitution and our government. Otherwise, I'm a very simple and harmless person." Well, one has to ask if Duale, in all those instances, was indeed defending the Constitution. I mean, was the public defiance to be accountable for a promise he made defending government or the Constitution? Was the public insult of a governor or the sweeping accusation of terrorist activities in Parliament really in defense of either Constitution or government? Unfortunately, those who would comprehensively answer these questions, Duale's perceived bosses that he is answerable to, are silent. And the problem with silence is that it sometimes is perceived as consent. Edith Kimani for KTN.